HSBC is the most dangerous bank in the world, not because it's failing, but because it's thriving. In one scheme, this bank laundered at least $881 million in drug cartel money, helping ruthless traffickers wash dirty cash through the financial system. Yet HSBC didn't collapse under scandal. Far from it, the bank prospered, barely missing a beat. That's what makes it so alarming. HSBC isn't a failing bank begging for rescue. It's a high-performing giant with profits more than $30 billion last year. It operates in over 60 countries, moves trillions of dollars, and touches every corner of the global economy. If a bank this powerful routinely skirts the law and stays in business, what does that mean for the rest of us? The stakes are high. When crime and finance intersect at this scale, the fallout can shake the world. Today, we'll uncover why HSBC's very success, its size, reach, and political connections may be its greatest threat. The bank's continued prosperity, despite facilitating crimes from drug money to sanctions evasion, raises an unsettling question. What happens when a bank becomes too big to punish? HSBC's story starts in the age of empires. Founded in 1865 in British Hong Kong, HSBC, short for Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, was created to finance colonial trade. In fact, the bank's early business centered on the booming opium trade between British India and Qing China. This colonial-era origin planted HSBC with one foot in the east and one in the west from the very beginning. Fast forward to today, and HSBC has grown into a colossus of global finance. It is headquartered in London but maintains a major base in Hong Kong, truly a bank of two worlds. The numbers speak volumes. HSBC is Europe's largest bank with roughly $3 trillion in assets, and it serves around 39 million customers across 57 to 60-plus countries and territories. Imagine HSBC as a central nervous system for global commerce, channeling capital across Asia, Europe, the Americas, Africa, and the Middle East. What's unique is HSBC's dual identity. Legally, it's a British bank. It moved its headquarters from Hong Kong to London in 1993, ahead of Hong Kong's handover to China. But economically, HSBC's lifeblood is in Asia. About two-thirds of HSBC's profits come from Asia, with nearly half of its profit generated in China alone. This east-west straddle means HSBC is not quite British and not quite Chinese. It has loyalties and exposures in both camps. Over 150 years, it became a powerhouse in Greater China. Its very name is a nod to Hong Kong and Shanghai, even as it remains a pillar of London's financial industry. Think of HSBC as the financial bridge between East and West. It has the political clout of a British institution and the cultural and business ties of an Asian institution. It prints Hong Kong's banknotes, yet it's regulated in the UK. This strategic ambiguity, global but beholden to multiple powers, will become central to our story. Because when a bank is everywhere and deeply embedded in geopolitics, who can hold it accountable? HSBC's early decades saw it financing trade flows that other banks wouldn't touch. By design, it was the bank of two worlds, British financiers catering to Asian commerce. Sir Thomas Sutherland, HSBC's founder, set it up in Hong Kong with one clear purpose: to capitalize on East-West trade, including, infamously, opium, under sound Scottish banking principles. The bank expanded quickly in Asia, opening in Shanghai the same year and soon across the region. Through wars and upheavals, HSBC became the leading bank of Asia, even issuing local currencies. Come the late 20th century, HSBC transformed again. In 1992, it acquired Britain's Midland Bank and, as a condition, shifted its domicile to London. The timing was no coincidence. With Hong Kong's 1997 return to China looming, HSBC hedged its bets by securing a home base in the West while keeping its fortune in the East. The result is a bank that is simultaneously an arm of British banking and an emblem of Asian finance. By the 2000s, HSBC marketed itself as the world's local bank. Its logo adorned city centres from New York to Nairobi to New Delhi. This unique structure, a British legal shell with an Asian profit engine, gave HSBC strategic advantages. It could move seamlessly between different regulatory systems and client bases. But it also fostered a kind of strategic ambiguity. Regulators and governments often weren't sure how to treat HSBC. Was it a domestic bank or a foreign one? In the UK, it was a home champion. In China, a crucial foreign investor. HSBC learned to play both sides. It built deep relationships with Western officials, even supplying a UK trade minister from its former chairman, and, simultaneously, it ingratiated itself with power brokers in Beijing. Notably, one of HSBC's top executives in Asia, Peter Wong, sits on China's top political advisory council. By the 2000s, HSBC ranked among the world's biggest banks, at times the 7th largest globally by assets. It was not only big in size, but big in influence. It advised governments, financed megadeals, and its alumni moved into high offices. In short, HSBC became too central to be ignored, a juggernaut straddling two worlds. But with great power came great temptation. As we'll see, HSBC's sprawling empire also harbored a shadow side, one where compliance and ethics sometimes took a backseat to profit. The first major glimpse of that shadow came in 2012, when HSBC's past finally caught up with it in a very public way. The year is 2012. After decades of quiet whispers, HSBC's original sin is laid bare. A massive money laundering scandal spanning continents. Investigators found that HSBC's lax controls had turned it into the go-to bank for drug cartels and sanctioned rogue states. The details were jaw-dropping. Between 2006 and 2010, HSBC's US subsidiary failed to monitor over $670 billion in wire transfers and $9.4 billion in cash shipments from HSBC's Mexico unit. In effect, billions in suspicious money flowed unchecked through HSBC's doors, an open invitation for money launderers. It wasn't hypothetical. In court documents, HSBC admitted that at least $881 million in drug trafficking proceeds, including money from Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, were laundered through HSBC. Picture that. One of the world's premier banks literally washing cartel cash, the same cash funding brutal violence. At the same time, HSBC was also breaching US sanctions. It illegally processed $660 million for clients in Iran, Sudan, Cuba, Libya, and Burma, countries under strict embargoes. Internal emails showed HSBC bankers conspiring to strip transaction details and avoid detection, with notes like, "Do not mention our name in New York and don't mention Iran." This was not an oversight. It was systemic misconduct. When US prosecutors and regulators confronted HSBC in 2012, the evidence of blatant failures was overwhelming. HSBC's compliance department had been practically non-existent in Mexico, as one US senator quipped, "a Mexican drug lord's dream." Bags of cash were delivered to HSBC's Mexican branches so routinely that tellers had custom boxes the size of dollar bills to fit the stacks. American prosecutors described HSBC's conduct as stunning failures of oversight, and worse, allowing drug money and sanctioned funds to flow freely. Yet, here's the twist. HSBC was never criminally charged. Despite egregious crimes that would send ordinary bankers to prison, HSBC, the institution, struck a deal. The US Justice Department, fearing a prosecution might destabilize the global financial system, offered HSBC a deferred prosecution agreement, DPA, essentially corporate probation. HSBC paid a then-record fine of $1.92 billion, about 5 weeks of its revenue, and no one went to jail. In an astonishing press conference, Assistant Attorney General Lanny Breuer admitted the government had weighed economic fallout. "Our goal here is not to bring HSBC down, not to cause a systemic effect on the economy." In other words, HSBC was arguably too big to jail. The reaction was fiery. Prominent voices in Congress blasted the outcome. Senator Chuck Grassley said HSBC had purchased a get-out-of-jail-free card for $1.9 billion. Senator Elizabeth Warren noted, "If you launder nearly $1 billion for drug cartels, you pay a fine and sleep in your own bed at night." The phrase "too big to jail" became headline shorthand for the affair. The moral hazard was clear. A bank this large could break the law and avoid the ultimate punishment because authorities feared the collateral damage of pulling its plug. Under the 2012 DPA, HSBC pledged to clean up its act. It brought in a monitor, overhauled compliance, and indeed by 2017 the agreement expired without further incident. But the legacy of that deal remains. It set a precedent that certain banks are so systemically important that traditional justice doesn't apply. Tellingly, HSBC's stock price rose on news of the settlement. Investors saw it as a bullet dodged, proof that HSBC's core business would carry on. And carry on it did. If the 2012 money laundering saga was an alarm bell, what followed has been a repeating chorus. HSBC's history since the DPA reveals a pattern of misconduct. Different schemes, same strategy, and usually the same outcome. Pay a fine, promise reforms, continue business. Let's look at two notable cases that followed in the mid-2000s, which show how deeply the bank operated in the shadows. In 2015, a trove of secret files, now known as the Swiss leaks, was made public by an international team of journalists. These leaked internal records from HSBC's Swiss private banking arm revealed that HSBC had been profiting from some of the world's darkest money. The files showed HSBC's Swiss bank maintained accounts holding over $100 billion for criminals, corrupt officials, tax dodgers, arms traffickers, blood diamond dealers, and even third-world dictators' bagmen. One account belonged to an arms dealer who supplied mortar bombs to child soldiers in Africa. Others held funds for people implicated in blood diamond trafficking and political bribery. It was a who's who of international outlaw finance sheltered by the bank's vaults. The scale of HSBC's Swiss misconduct was staggering. The leaked records covered over 100,000 clients across more than 200 countries, an underground economy of hidden wealth. HSBC's Swiss bankers didn't just turn a blind eye, they actively helped clients conceal assets and dodge taxes, handing out untraceable cash in lump sums and advising how to circumvent local laws. For example, bankers gave wealthy customers bricks of $1,000 bills, no questions asked. This wasn't a few bad apples, it was a business model. An HSBC internal memo even acknowledged that compliance standards in its Swiss arm were significantly lower than today's norms, an understatement to say the least. Caught red-handed, HSBC again apologized and claimed it had changed. The bank pointed out that it had exited clients and cut its Swiss private bank's client base by 70% since 2007. Indeed, by 2015, HSBC started getting out of some of these secret accounts business. But accountability was limited. Swiss authorities and others did pursue investigations. Eventually, HSBC's Swiss unit paid a $192 million fine to U.S. authorities for helping Americans evade taxes. A few minor players were charged. Yet the pattern persisted. HSBC, as an institution, avoided any crippling consequence. The Swiss leaks saga showed HSBC operating at the nexus of dirty money and secrecy, and largely skating by with a check and an apology. Around the same time, another scandal hit, this time striking at the heart of the global financial market. HSBC was implicated in a massive foreign exchange market manipulation scheme. Between 2008 and 2013, traders at HSBC and several other major banks formed tight-knit alliances in online chat rooms with cheeky names like the Cartel, the A-Team, and One Team, One Dream to collude on currency trades. These were senior traders entrusted with handling client orders. Instead of competing honestly, they shared confidential order information and coordinated strategies to whack the FX market for profit. Transcripts later published by regulators read like something from a heist movie. In one private chat, a trader typed, "Don't want other numpties in MKT to know," as they discussed moving exchange rates. Others congratulated each other. "Nice job, mate. Yeah, baby," after nudging rates in their favor. The target of this manipulation was the daily foreign exchange fixing rates, benchmark currency prices that affect trillions in transactions. By tweaking these rates, the traders could pad their own trading profits at the expense of clients or market integrity. When regulators in the UK, EU, and US uncovered this FX cartel, they meted out record fines. HSBC alone paid $618 million in penalties in late 2014 for its role. In total, about $4.3 billion in fines were split among 6 banks that settled that year. Investigations found a free-for-all culture on these trading floors, the very kind of culture HSBC had promised to fix after 2012. Once again, HSBC pleaded that a few rogue employees behaved badly, that it was tightening oversight, etc. Indeed, HSBC did fire or discipline some traders, but notably, the bank itself faced no criminal charges. It paid fines as a cost of doing business. As the UK's Financial Conduct Authority emphasised, this was about market integrity and the bank's unacceptable failure to control their own teams. The Forex scandal illustrated a recurring theme. HSBC was so large and ubiquitous that it kept finding opportunities and temptations to break the rules. From tax evasion in Switzerland to currency manipulation in London, the bank's internal controls failed or were circumvented time and again. Penalties, when they came, barely dented HSBC's finances. For context, that $618 million FX fine was a fraction of HSBC's annual profits. And the $1.9 billion money laundering fine? HSBC's market value actually rose after that settlement. Investors knew the bank could absorb the hit. This pattern raises a troubling question. Has HSBC simply factored in legal penalties as another business expense? When one scandal's dust settles, another seems to emerge. Over the years, HSBC has paid billions in fines for a litany of issues, from US mortgage bond mis-selling to helping clients violate sanctions in later cases to unsafe practices in various markets. Yet not once since 2012 has HSBC or its top brass faced criminal prosecution. The message many take from this is one of impunity. If you are as pivotal as HSBC, authorities will hesitate to truly take you down, and that, in itself, is dangerous. So far, we've seen HSBC's unchecked misconduct and survival. Next, we look at a new kind of risk surrounding HSBC, not just what it has done in the past, but how its position between great powers makes it a potential weapon in geopolitical conflict today. In recent years, HSBC has found itself in the crosshairs of geopolitics like never before. The bank's dual identity, British and Chinese, now places it at the center of a high-stakes standoff between East and West. As tensions flare between the United States and China, HSBC is being pulled in 2 directions, raising a new kind of danger. It's not just about fines or scandals anymore. It's about a global bank being weaponized by rival superpowers. In 2020, HSBC made a fateful move. Amid historic pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law to quash dissent. Most businesses stayed neutral, but HSBC broke from its usual caution and publicly endorsed China's national security law for Hong Kong. In June 2020, HSBC's Asia-Pacific CEO Peter Wong, himself a Chinese political advisor, signed a petition backing the law. The bank declared on Chinese social media that it respects and supports all laws that stabilize Hong Kong's social order. This was an extraordinary stance for a London-based bank, effectively siding with Beijing's controversial crackdown. It signaled that when forced to choose, HSBC would not risk its access to China's market, even if that meant angering the West. HSBC's alignment with Beijing wasn't just symbolic. Shortly after, reports emerged of HSBC freezing accounts of Hong Kong pro-democracy activists and organizations. A notable case was exiled lawmaker Ted Hui, who fled Hong Kong in late 2020. Hui announced that HSBC, along with other banks, froze his family's accounts on orders from Hong Kong police. The police claimed they suspected money laundering. Hui called it political retaliation. In another instance, a church that helped protesters had its HSBC accounts frozen under the new law's provisions. HSBC insisted it was just complying with local law and police requests, but to many in the West, this looked like complicity in political repression. British and American lawmakers openly criticized HSBC for bowing to Beijing and abandoning Hong Kong's civil society. The bank that once symbolized Hong Kong's East-West stature was now seen as an enforcer of China's will in the city. Yet at the same time, HSBC must also appease the United States and its allies. This is the other side of the coin. As a global bank with a major US presence and dollar clearing license, HSBC is bound by US laws, including sanctions against China's officials. When Washington sanctioned 11 top Hong Kong and Chinese officials, including Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam, in 2020 for undermining the city's autonomy, banks like HSBC had to cut those individuals off from the US dollar system. In fact, Carrie Lam later complained she had to keep piles of cash at home because sanctions left her without any banking services, a sign that even Chinese-facing banks complied with the US measures. This puts HSBC in a tight spot. Enforce US sanctions and you anger Beijing. Ignore them and you violate US law, risking heavy penalties or being frozen out of the dollar markets. It's a no-win situation. The clearest example of HSBC's geopolitical peril came with the Huawei saga. In 2018, at US request, Canadian authorities arrested Huawei's CFO and founder's daughter, Meng Wanzhou, accusing her of fraud and sanction violations. It emerged that HSBC had provided information to US prosecutors, aiding the case against Huawei. Beijing was furious. Chinese state media accused HSBC of betraying China and going to the dark side. The Communist Party's flagship newspaper, People's Daily, warned that HSBC would pay a painful price for its lack of loyalty. Soon after, China's government and state-owned enterprises began retaliating. At least 9 major Chinese state companies reportedly cut or reduced ties with HSBC. A leaked blacklist from one giant, Baowu Steel, even labeled HSBC as too high risk to use, lumping it in with troubled local banks as persona non grata. Chinese regulators piled on pressure, launching investigations and pointedly fining HSBC's mainland unit for unrelated infractions. In short, Beijing made HSBC an example. If you assist US actions against China's interests, you may lose your access to China's lucrative market. For HSBC, which derives such a huge share of its profits in Asia, this was an existential threat. One former Hong Kong chief executive even suggested that Chinese banks could easily supplant HSBC in China. On the flip side, US politicians have also issued veiled threats. Imagine if the US decided HSBC was enabling China's authoritarian policies. It could face sanctions or lose its critical dollar clearing rights, a virtual death sentence for an international bank. So far that hasn't happened, but the risk is clearly present. In an era of escalating sanctions and economic nationalism, a bank caught in the middle could be pulled apart. HSBC's share price and reputation ride on a delicate balance, staying in Beijing's good graces without alienating Washington. Herein lies the new danger. HSBC is no longer just a private financial institution. It is a potential geopolitical pawn. Its vast network can be used to apply pressure. China might demand banks like HSBC enforce its political edicts, as in Hong Kong, while the US demands obedience to its sanctions and laws. If HSBC makes the wrong move either way, it could trigger a retaliation that reverberates through the global financial system. Unlike a purely Chinese bank or a purely Western bank, HSBC is entangled with both superpowers' economies. That gives it influence, yes, but also makes it a single point of failure if East-West financial relations sour. Consider a scenario where tensions escalate, sanctions widen, capital flows bifurcate. A bank like HSBC could become financial collateral damage, or even a conduit of financial warfare. This isn't far-fetched. We're seeing early signs of it now. The fact that HSBC's leadership must navigate calls from US Congress on one hand and Chinese state media on the other is unprecedented. The bank's own investors are worried. HSBC's largest shareholder, China's Ping An Insurance, even pushed a proposal to split HSBC into an Asian bank and a Western bank, arguing that the East-West mix is now more liability than strength. HSBC resisted that breakup, but the pressure underscores how fragile its position has become.